We found a super interesting Reddit conversation about a board member who wants to know every detail about every donor. Seems a bit sketchy. Let's talk about it.
We are Ted and Lisa Snyder, and we are nonprofit coaches. A better world needs healthier nonprofits. And on this channel, we talk about how nonprofit leaders can do better and be better.
We found this super interesting Reddit post, and it says right away, I have a board member who insists on knowing who donates and how much they give. Quote, everyone needs to know who responds, how they respond, and who doesn't, so we can thank our personal relationships and position future asks accordingly.
Thoughts? We have thoughts.
We have lots of thoughts.
We can give you the
about
thoughts.
This.
Right away, we have a conflict here. I don't know the position of the original poster with this, what their position is within the organization.
It seems like they might be in like the executive director position.
It seems like they know who the people are, or maybe in some sort of position where they could have the information if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. But this board member is a different person in the story. And boards are very interesting because they have a fiduciary duty to the organization. But depending on their role in the board, it doesn't mean that they have access to every single aspect of the organization. When it comes to donors, depending on how the bylaws are written up and how the organization acts, certain board members will have more access to certain data than other board members will have. And I think from this board member's position, if I had to guess, he's looking at this going, you know, if I knew who was giving, I could thank them accordingly and I could let them know how grateful we are. And maybe I could become better friends with them and it would help the conversation. And I could know better and all these different things, which can sound good.
Massage the relationship. Maybe they'd donate more or introduce us to some of their other rich friends.
Or on the flip side of it, if I know who's not giving, I know who to ask next time and who to talk to and who to kind of try and push a little bit in a different direction.
Or who to not waste my time talking to.
Oh. Have we heard that? We've heard that. Let's not do that.
So there are a bunch of red flags that come up with this right away, obviously, because some people want to be anonymous when they give. I mean, I have done a few fundraising things, donation drives, stuff like that. And there are some people who are like, yeah, I want to give and like, go ahead and celebrate me. Like, it'll be fun. And there are other people who are like, I really don't want anybody to know. This is my own personal choice to give this. And I want to remain anonymous.
Yeah.
And you better believe that I honored that request. They just gave the organization a bunch of money.
Yeah.
So like, we're going to keep them anonymous if that's what they want.
Yeah. We've had people give us like donations over the years, like not our nonprofit, but just like us as individuals when our kids were really young and it was kind of a, you need some help. I'm going to help you guys out. And we had some people who wanted to be like, hey, you know what? I just want to say thank you for doing this thing. Here's a gift, whatever. They wanted to be known. I've had other people who gave an envelope of money to someone who passed it off to someone else who then gave it to us. And they were like, I don't know, someone else told me to give you the envelope. Like, and it was the strange, it wasn't strange. Like, I understood it because they were like, they didn't want us to know who it was. And I'm guessing part of it was just their personality. And the other part might have been to preserve the relationship because they didn't want to be in a position where they felt like we knew and we knew who they were. And money changes awkward dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely.
It changes so much. And so it's the same thing with the nonprofit organization. Yeah, your nonprofit isn't like an individual. But at the same time, there are so many relationships there that there are going to be donors who do not want to be known. They don't want to be asked again. They don't want to feel pressured in the future. They don't want people to know their names or to know how much they're given or they're giving or whatever the case may be. And we have to respect that.
Yeah. So this poster then goes on to say he's new to the board. So this board member is new to the board and his method of communication starts with you need to before gathering information. So I write a personal thank you to every donor. I'm okay with him knowing the donor names, but amount? I suppose it reminds me of working in a church. Knowing who gives what is highly sensitive, and I don't yet trust him enough yet to share this information with him. So he's happy calling the shots from the rear, but doesn't want to assume any executive leadership. And that points out a few other just like warning signs to me where if this board member is a very kind of like take charge sort of individual, and they're saying right off the bat, they haven't built the trust of the organization yet. They're new to the board. I mean, they built enough to become a part of the board, but to come in and say like, I need all this information, I would be extremely hesitant with giving that, because how do I know you're not going to just take all the highest donors and start your own nonprofit doing something different and completely undercut what we're doing? Like, that would be the first thing that would come to my mind. Is we need to build some trust here before we like give out the sensitive information from that perspective. But then also on the other side, it's just like these people might not want to be known.
Yeah. The other thing, this board member is new, which means they may or may not know the language or the systems of the organization. It doesn't particularly sound like they want to know how the organization works. This person, even if they're not trying to snipe the largest donors, could decide that it's their job to get to know the largest donors and completely piss them off. It could turn into something where this one person, because they're a board member and now they matter. Sorry, I said that really jadedly. Like some experience. No, I'm just kidding. Kath, kidding. But there can be a certain amount where someone is put in this new position that does carry weight and does carry authority, and they overstep in a way that actually loses trust with your volunteers or with your donors. This information is crucial. The way nonprofits treat people is so important. The way nonprofits treat money could destroy your nonprofit.
Yes.
And so, like, it sounds terrible, but someone can get away with treating people disrespectfully for a long time. But the minute it comes out that they're treating the money badly, even a whiff of that could crash it down. It tanks the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's hard because, you know, if you have your board members and you have your executive leadership and they have specific responsibilities, I mean, the idea of the executive leadership is that they're in it with the people. They're actually the one who is rubbing elbows a little bit more with the donors and requesting the money and doing the work and making sure that things all happen, for a board member then to take on that responsibility and saying like, I need to know what all these, like, you shouldn't have to know. Like, the board shouldn't have to know. The board should be able to say, hey, you know who all of the people are. I want you to be really smart about how you are interacting with each of the people who donate.
Yeah.
Like, that's the board's job. I would think that they don't need the information in order to advise the executive director what to do.
Right. In this position, given that whatever their board position is, it doesn't sound like it's one that would naturally know who the donors are. So with that in mind, your best case scenario here is you have a board member who doesn't understand their role and who doesn't understand how to communicate about donations. Because even if you know who all the donors are, the way that you communicate with potential donors and your current donors shouldn't really vary depending on how much they're giving. If someone's giving $50 or $1,000, they should be hearing a lot of the same stories, all of the same statistics, and your conversation with them might be a little bit varied. Like, if you know someone in your org who's a small business owner and who routinely gives you $10,000 a year, yes, that conversation is going to go a little bit different than someone who donates $20 a month. And that's okay. But for the vast majority of the donations for your organization, the individuals and those individual amounts shouldn't even become a factor. Now, if they're curious about this from a statistics standpoint, you could say this percentage of our donations is monthly versus one time. This percentage is in this bracket of dollar amount. This percentage is in this bracket of dollar amount. This percentage is in this bracket, whatever. There are ways to get him the information that he needs. But your best case scenario with this is that he doesn't know what his position is and that he's overstepping and doesn't really care that he's overstepping.
Yeah.
Your worst case scenario here is that
there's something nefarious going on.
Yeah. Like, and I would wonder what that is. There's a chance that if you tell him, like, absolutely not, you will never get that information. It's not part of the board position that you're in. But here is the part that you're in. If he really cares about the donors, like, he might quit because of that. I have to assume that that's not the case with this person. Most people don't join boards for those reasons. But we might just be a little bit jaded and have seen some things.
Well, I think too, like it depends so much on how the nonprofit is structured, because you can have bylaws written that say the board does have access to all of these specific pieces of information.
But then there needs to be clear communication on what his role is, so that that information isn't being used to the detriment of the organization.
Right, because the board member probably isn't supposed to be the person who's raising funds. Now, they might have things that they can do, right? But if they're not supposed to be that person, then they shouldn't be taking on that role to do that.
Right.
Like, board members should be really like advising and helping to make wise decisions. And honestly, you can do so much of that without knowing names and amounts.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it comes down to.
So now, with all that being said, let's say you're an organization that has a board that does actually help with the fundraising, because we recognize that that is a position.
It's pretty common.
It's pretty common. If that's the case, we would highly suggest that your boards be a part of the donation gathering process by helping to spread the word to their own personal networks as best as they can. People who are already in the organization or a part of the organization need to hear the very clear branding from the executive director. And the executive director can pull in other people and say, hey, you have a really good relationship with this person. Would you mind just touching base with them and seeing how they're doing, if they have any questions for the organization or whatever it might be? But the board can help with fundraising, but separating out what the fundraising portion is versus what the fundraising language is needs to be very clear for your organization. Otherwise, you'll have an executive director and the board members all running in different directions, trying to bring people under a singular umbrella that hasn't had a clear vision statement, stories, metrics, and all the other things that make it so the resources are possible. And so if you are in an organization where the board actually does help with the fundraising, make sure it's clear what part of the fundraising they are helping with and who they are trying to connect with as fundraisers. Is it their own personal group? Is it businesses in the community? Is it like someone that they've never met before, but they're just trying to go to networking events to spread the word about the organization? Any of those are fine, but you need to be very clear about it. Otherwise, you'll end up with board members who go with the people who are the easiest, and you'll end up with all the board members contacting all of the same people who are already given to your organization, and it'll turn into a headache.
And I think this outlines this whole Reddit conversation outlines a really, really important piece of just nonprofit work in general, is that getting more information on the situation is always extremely helpful. If we were advising this nonprofit leader, I think I would say, did they tell you why they need those things? Why do they need that information? And it's like, the answer comes out, oh, they want to be able to sort of see, like, you know, are these people giving larger percentages of their income, lower percentage? Like, is like a doctor giving $10, or, you know, like are they trying to gather data? What is the reason for wanting this information? Because that would actually tell me a lot more than just this board member is new, talks like this, and wants this information. We need to know why they want that information, and they should be able to say why they need the information. Also, other board members should be involved in this process as well. If this one board member is saying, like, hey, we need this, what is the rest of the board saying? Because if the rest of the board is saying, actually, we don't need that, then who cares what he says? Because they're going to overrule his weird decision to want to have all this information. So there's a lot of unknowns in this situation too. But I think the overall thing is figuring out what's actually underneath, what's really going on underneath. Is this organization struggling a ton financially right now, and they brought in this board member because they have the ability, they've done it in the past, and they have the ability to pinpoint and figure out and fix these kinds of issues? If so, I would trust this person to have that information. If they've done this in the past with other organizations and got them back up on their feet when it comes to funding, then this is a perfectly good request, because this is what they were brought into the board to help with.
And that's a really good point. The onboarding for your board needs to be even better thought out than the onboarding for staff members in your organization. And the fact that there is a board member who's new and asking stuff, and it has people within the organization going, I don't know about this person, is a red flag that something has not been communicated that needs to be communicated, whether it's to him or whether it's to the staff members or the executive director or whatever it is. There's a piece of the puzzle that is missing that is causing conflict between the board and the organization. And those have to be relationships that are very well maintained and constantly improving so that things can continue to work well. Otherwise, you'll end up with conflict in the future.
Hey, if you found this video interesting, we have another one where we cover an article talking about the Catholic Church being the original pyramid scheme. We'll see you over there.